of Christian content. Pastor Harold, did I interrupt? Is there something you need to tell the group first before I continue?
No, it was just, I think we started recording the program and that's all. But you go ahead.
Perfect. So in the last session, we talked about how just like each of us have our own love languages in our relationships with people, we have our own love languages in our relationship with God. We kind of looked at the 5 different love languages. And the main point when working with teens is that we can't expect each of them to worship God and follow God and live their life of faith exactly like we do. And so when you're working with teens, it's nice to build a team of people who are different than you, to be able to help engage them in their love languages separately. Really, for this session, I'm kind of talking more towards leaders, just on 4 really, I would say, key ingredients to working with teenagers or youth. Some of them seem very simple, but this is just Matthew. This isn't the word of God. This is just from my experience of working with high school students and junior high students for the last 10 years. And so I wanted to share 4 things with you guys, but then I wanted to give most of the time for those of you who are leaders. Like I recognize Pastor Poulet here, who did a youth rally for me back in Calgary like 7 years ago. And so I recognize other youth leaders here. And if you had any other questions, we would go over that. So with working with teenagers, number 1, this is going to seem like it's not important, but I put it as number 1 because it's kind of the most important. You have to be able to play with teenagers or play with youth. In the opening books of education, Ellen White talks about how teachers, if they want students to listen to them, you have to play with them. So if you can imagine a hungry man on the side of the road, like I'm at right now, and you go to a hungry man on the side of the road and you say, hey, look, let me tell you about Jesus. Obviously, there's something missing, right? Before you tell him about Jesus, what do you have to do before you try to share the love of Jesus with a guy who's hungry? What do you guys think?
Feed him.
Yeah, you got to feed him, right? Very, very basic, very common sense. But with kids, teenagers still too, and youth still too, when they get to be about college or young adults, it's not exactly the same. But with teenagers and kids and youth, playing with them is like feeding a homeless man. It's so important that if you ever want to interact with teenagers and have them listen to you and have them learn from Jesus from you, you have to play with them as much as, if not more than, a hungry man on the side of the road needs to be fed before you can tell him about Jesus. I can tell you, I have been at the position now where I've been a youth pastor for many years, and some of my youth who are now youth pastors themselves, they will all testify that playing with and spending time with, talking with teenagers is like giving a hungry man some food. You have to play with them. You have to find what they're interested in. You know, that's the whole Christ method of loan will bring true success in winning the people. He mingled with people who desired their good. That is the mingling part of youth ministry and teenage ministry. You have to play with them. It doesn't matter if you're good at it. It doesn't matter if you even like it, but it's kind of a very vital thing. One of the youth pastors in Calgary, he, mid 30s, almost 40, not a basketball player, but he has a lot of students who were basketball players. And he was telling me, man, I'm having such a hard time talking to these kids. They're not listening to me. Nothing I do is making any sense to them. And it's not like he wasn't a good teacher. He was. But as soon as he started to play basketball with them, he said it all turned around. So you got to be open to playing with kids in a way that makes you seem a little silly at times. But I would say more than anything else, that is so dramatically important. Sometimes we want to look professional. We want to wear our dresses and our suits, and we want to be respected. But if you want teens to listen to you, got to play with them. As they get to be later on in high school, listening to them is kind of like playing with them. It's kind of talking with them. And college students especially, it's more about listening than it is about playing. But playing is, especially with teens, junior high, high school, it is so very important. So I hope that's kind of clear. Second thing I would say is important is leadership. And I don't mean the leadership of your teachers as much as I mean the leadership of the teens and the youth within their peer group. So you always have that one kid or that two kids in a group who, if they decide to do it, it's cool and everyone else is going to do it. And if they decide not to do it, everyone else is going to think it's not cool and not do it. In any kind of teen setting or youth setting, you have, and this is true within the local churches, even as people get bigger, there's your leaders who, if they're on board, everyone else is on board. You have to identify your youth leaders, your teen leaders who are peers, and you have to win them to Jesus and to yourself. Because some of the teens, they might like Jesus, but if they don't like you, they're not going to do anything you want to do with them. So it's very important to identify your teen leaders, your youth leaders who are actually teenagers and youth themselves. And then when you identify them, empower them to do for you what you think you should be doing. So, like right now I'm at Sight and Sound, and, we've organized this trip, but really I've gotten my youth leaders who are actually high school students to do all the organizing. They do all the planning for the Sabbath school. They do all the planning for the outreaches and for the worship times. You find your leaders and you empower them. And so leadership is very important. I found it's actually possible to run a youth group without any extra adult support. I don't think that's the way to go, but that's just to tell you guys, leadership is so important among the peers and the teenagers that I would say it's even more important than the next one, which is family involvement. Having the parents involved, having the families involved. I was able to get away without involving families for 4 years in youth ministry. But now that I'm a parent myself, and you have kids and you care about them, you want to really involve them as well. So when you do that, you get the ones in the group who wouldn't join because of the other peers, the ones who are kind of more off to themselves, and it gives an opportunity for everyone to be involved. So really simple. You want to play with them. You want to identify their leaders. You want to have your families involved. And number 4, you really want, if possible, to get leaders in the church who are elders, who are people in the church who will never go anywhere, to build relationships with the students. So getting the head elder to help do some things, getting the head deacon to be involved with the youth, so that every time they go back to church, they have good, positive relationships. When all their peers are gone and maybe their families moved on, they can come back to the church and say, hey, I know this head elder, I know this head deacon who can support me. So I put it in that order because that's the level of importance I think these things are. You got to play with them. You got to identify their leaders. You got to have their family involved. And then you got to definitely work with the leaders in the church, building relationships with the leaders in the church. So those are things that I feel like in 10 years, that's the best I got for you guys. Obviously, you want to be a person of prayer. That's important. That's the foundation. You want to be a person who cares about, the salvation of young people. That's the foundation. But the things that I think are not as obvious are, playing with the kids, finding the leaders, using the families, and building relationships within the church. So that was my 15-minute monologue. But now I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell me where you're from, what you're experiencing, maybe some of your challenges, because every church is different and every youth group is different and every circumstance is different. So I'd like to hear from you, to hear what you're doing and maybe what you think has worked, and maybe this can just be a time of sharing, where you're at. So feel free to take turns or, go first where you're at.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Pastor Matthew. I think now time for us to respond to what you just said. I, for one, cannot share too much because both of my churches, we don't really have teens, young people, only 2 or 3 kids that are age 6, 7. So they are still they are young, and we don't have these activities that you just told with them. But any of you out there who heard what Pastor Matthew just said, we would like to hear from you. So what do you think? Maybe you can open your camera so we know for sure that you are there, because like this, I'm not sure. I don't know who is here, who is not here. If you can open your cameras and give a feedback to Pastor Matthew, would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks again for the first presentation that we had. I so enjoyed. I know Pastor said he's not one for words of affirmation, but that's my love language. So I do want to give that to you. I really appreciate what you shared earlier. And the comment, I guess, would be in respect to what you just shared now, is that is so true about the playing. Even when I was teaching my students, I found I could connect with them so much quicker if I took time. In fact, the first week that I had when I was teaching, it was really just kind of a fun get to know you week. And so even though we were doing work, I would always be doing games and playing icebreakers. And these are kids that were high school kids, but they seemed to enjoy it. It did break the ice, and we were able to build connections. And so even now, being a mother of one teenager, even in terms of sharing Jesus, I found the best way, although I don't always do it just for sake of time, but to be able to just hang out with her. We have talk time. And so it's just like a catch up. Or she loves playing Uno. So we'll be at the breakfast table and she's like, can we play Uno? I'm like, sure, let's play Uno. And, there's just other things that she has interest in. And so I've entered her world. And so I find by doing that, then we're able to build bridges. And so, like I said, I have to be more intentional because there's some areas of interest that she may be interested in that I'm not. But it's just, saying, okay, this is what she's into. So for instance, our family, this is on my husband's side, he's a big ATVer. Well, I had a pretty traumatic experience with ATV, and I wasn't so sure I wanted to do it. But to be part of my family, and this is also his world and her world. So I just said, Lord, help me not to have fear, help me to trust in you. And so we just go out together. So that's something that I find is working in our family, and even with the young girls that I minister to through Providence Girls, just trying to have fun and enjoy them. I think it does make a difference, but it is something I still have to work on. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jackie. Appreciate. I saw on the screen Pastor Elizabeth. Did you want to say something?
Thank you so much. Oh. Thank you so much for sharing, Pastor Matthew. It's really nice to see you. I have 3 boys, 2 of them are teenagers, and what you said really resonates with me. Jackie shared about talk time with her daughter. For the boys, playing is a huge one. Wrestling is a huge thing in the house. But I think also, their way of experiencing Jesus is going to look different to the way I experience Jesus. And I think just even realizing that different generations hold different core values is important, because it will look different than what we're used to. But yeah, I'm really thankful that, we have a relationship with the kids, with the teens, and allowing them to lead, I think really sets them up in a good place to keep their faith in Jesus strong. So that's been my experience. And I just thank you, Matt, for what you shared.
Appreciate that, Pastor Poulet, and thank you for sharing, Jackie, as well. Yeah, one thing I love about working with youth is that, right, every generation interacts with faith so differently, and even how they interact with Bible stories, like how Generation Z interacts with Bible stories now, it's so much different than even how they did 10 years ago. We were just reading in Sabbath school class about the centurion, and all of them were so focused on the power dynamics in that story, in terms of the centurion being the one in power and caring about the servant who's not in power. And so definitely sitting down and listening to them, we still learn from them through their eyes of spirituality, and they do encounter faith differently than us. So yeah, I agree with you completely. That's awesome. Hey, how have you been, by the way? You're a family ministry director out there in Ontario now, aren't you?
Yes, we are okay. Thank you. It's nice to see you. How is your family?
Oh yeah, really good. My kiddos have adjusted. They're little, so they adjust to the move pretty good. And my wife has the hardest time because we've left her family. So that's been tough for her, but you know how it is.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything about teen ministry that they think is valuable to share, or maybe a specific circumstance that they're working with that might need some extra heads around? Because every church, every youth group is a different person and kind of can be treated differently.
Yeah, one thing I can tell from experience from the church that I'm coming from, that the youth leader was always there for us. Like he gathered the youth from the small towns from around, and he took the time. Sometimes I remember we were 6, 7 of us in one small car, and he was taking us home late in the night after we had some fun time playing together almost every Sabbath evening. And he gathered us. Then Sunday he came again, and then another important thing is that even the elderly, meaning that older people than us, not necessarily the old, but elderly, like the people in their 30s, 40s, some of them even in their 50s, they came to those evenings when we played together, and they have been playing with us. And because of that, we had a strong connection, like the church as a whole. We didn't have groups like this is a younger group, that's an older group, that's middle generation. We were together, and I remember that, and I really appreciate it because of that, we were opened towards the people with experience, and we had the courage to ask them things that otherwise we would not ask. And I can see that teenagers today don't have the courage to ask us or to ask older people on different topics because they just don't feel comfortable. But partially we are the reason as well, because we don't spend, like, generally churches or even us pastors, sometimes we don't spend enough time with them, and because of that they are not opened towards us, and because of that connection is lost, it's harder to reach out to them.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for sharing that. And your experience growing up where the churches would come together, or the parents and the kids would come together and play, I think is the most healthy form of family ministry that there is in the church, because like you said, it opens up those connections. My thing is because I've been looking at, like, in my heart, I care about evangelism, I care about growing the church. And truth be told, most, at least in North America, most of the people who we get into our churches, we get because we've baptized them young. All throughout the North American division, we have been able to win people to Jesus, most of them before the age of like 10. And so I think it's funny that as a church, and even other denominations know this. If we try to reach people when they're older, set in life, we need to. It's important because everyone needs an opportunity to learn about Jesus. But if we were to focus our efforts, especially on smaller churches, on families and their children, it's got a lot more, I think, bang for its buck. Because when you get to my age, for me, I don't really care about the church outside of what they can help my kids learn to be disciples. Like, I have 3 kids myself, and if I have to choose between good preaching and good children's programs, I'm going to choose the children's programs. Even at our church that I'm at right now, it's 2,000 members. We have a survey out, and the thing that parents care about the most at our church is, number 1, the children's program, number 2, the school, number 3, the preaching, and then number 4, the community. But the kids and the young people, they are a top priority once you have them. And so, that's just something that I feel like it's not the most prestigious line of work. Especially being a youth pastor for a long time. It's kind of like some people will joke and say, you wanna try real ministry on for a while. And so you're never going to get a lot of credentials for it, but if you care about winning people to the gospel, young people is the way to start. Their hearts fall in love so young with God and with other people. So
Yeah, that's right. And it's normal that churches are interested about the children, because that's where the future of that congregation is, basically. And if the church is able to get the kids at a young age, that church has at least one more generation of lifetime. Yeah. I don't know if there are other questions here, but there were 2 questions today morning, but we left quickly. One of them is there an email address that you could share with us where we can reach you?
Oh, for sure. I'll write it in the chat here.
Yeah, just write it in the chat. And another question is, would you be able to share with us the PowerPoint presentation that you used today morning?
Absolutely. Can I email that to Pastor Scott, and then I can give it out that way, because I won't be able to do it from my cell phone where I'm at.
Yeah, for sure. Just give it to Pastor Scott, and then he will forward it to us. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. For sure. I'd like to. I like to share it out. That's what we learned from our seminary professors. They always gave us their PowerPoints so that we can use them and active as if we created it.
That's right. Yeah, there is something in the chat. Elizabeth says, children and youth ministry is the most important investment. That's for sure. I can agree with that, because, as I said, there is the future of the church, of every congregation.
Yeah, and me and Liz, we're biased because we've worked with them for a while. but we really do. If you just look at the statistics of when people give their heart to Jesus, and even think about your own personal relationships, like most of our best friends, typically we got when we were in high school or junior high, sometimes in college, but those are the ages where we form relationships that last for a lifetime. And so when we get to enter into a young person's life during that age, not only do we get to be their friend for a lifetime and they can trust us, but they also can connect with Jesus for a lifetime and see that he's an enjoyable friend to have and a God worth serving. So go ahead, Kathy.
Just clarify for me, maybe I'm just not understanding. Like, so you use the term playing a lot. And so with different personalities with teens, like what would playing look like for someone who might be like quiet, more a book person, like an introvert? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, how would you connect with a teen who's more like that, who's not into sports and stuff like that, or games?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because there are a lot of introverts. And a lot of the time with introverts, some of them, for instance,
I think we lost him there for a second. Pastor Matthew, are you there? I think he had lost his connection. So we can wait a few more seconds. Probably he's trying to reconnect. Just give him some time.
Pastor Harold, can I just say something to what Kathy Ann just asked?
Go ahead. Sure.
Because not everybody is outgoing or a sporty guy or a sporty girl, but I think all young people have interests. And so connecting with them on their interest is a way to play. It could be photography, it could be blogging, it could be knitting, whatever it is. I think just even getting them to talk about what their interests are is a great way to play or connect with a young person or even an adult.
Yeah, thank you. Pastor Matthew, you're back now.
Yeah, sorry about that. I agree with what Liz said. It's finding their interest that they find enjoyable, joining them with them, and on that, that's a form of play. It's something that they don't have to do, but it's a hobby. That's an easier way of saying it, is finding a hobby that they enjoy and engaging with them on that, whether it's reading or talking about some fan fiction that they like or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be running and jumping. It's just joining them on their hobbies. I put the word play because it's fun and it's something that's not required, but it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for both of your answers, and thank you for the question as well. Is there anyone else with a question out there? I am not sure. I think I've seen one camera turned on before for a second there, but I'm not sure who that person was. I think they're not here anymore. There is a question. I will read. How do you help teens develop healthy friendships that will lead them to Jesus when some unhealthy friendships might lead them away from Jesus?
Yes, that's a very good question, and that's something that I wrestle with. You have to know your kid. Some of your kids, just to be quite frank, are followers. They're not leaders. They're just not the type to make a decision and stick to it regardless of what other people are going to do. Most people, I would say, are followers. They're going to do what their peers are going to do. So you got to know your kid. If your kid's a follower and he can be around other kids who are not Christians and he can lead them to Jesus, then that's good. And there are kids like that, but a lot of the kids are not sure about their own faith and their own identity, that they'll let the opposite happen. And I've seen that happen too, where kids will choose not to follow Jesus because the cool kid thought it wasn't popular to follow Jesus. So it depends on knowing your child. And so if I'm a parent, and I'm in a circumstance where all their friends are not following Jesus, I'm going to do whatever I can to, and this is going to cause hell between you and your kid, but I'm going to do everything I can to put them in a place of influence where they'll be influenced for the better, because they might hate you for it, but that's just where I'm at, because I'd rather my kid be mad at me and be around Christians and have a better chance at being saved than to be at a school where everyone is doing drugs and drinking alcohol and not caring about God, and him have a good friends. I'd rather my kid be a loner than have friends and be popular in an environment where he's going to be lost. So you have to know your kid. If he's a leader, then you can really place them with the right support anywhere. And if they're typical, like many of us who we kind of go with the flow, then I would try to put them in an environment where they're more Christians. That's why we have Christian schools. That's why we have Christian academies, because we know the importance of being in an atmosphere where Jesus is a cool thing and a culture of Christ is predominantly important. I don't know if that helps, if that answers the question exactly what you're talking about. Maybe if you say some words, I might have a better understanding.
Yeah, this was just a question in the chat that was sent to me privately. And another question is, if a child, do you know that the question is, if my child is using substances that I've discovered, how can I approach my child so that I wouldn't do harm, but would help her to get rid of that?
Yeah. This is just my experience, so take this with a grain of salt. But most kids who do drugs or drink at a young age, it's because they're not getting the love and affection they need from the people that need to show it to them the most. It's a form of medication. There are a few kids who do it because they think it's cool and things like that, but it's such a very rare case that typically kids are medicating themselves to make themselves feel better with the drugs and the alcohol. So I would say someone who's doing that type of thing, who's into some kind of drug or some kind of alcohol, those are symptoms. I would try to find the root cause, which is, in my opinion, there's some need that they have in their life that isn't being met. Because I was a Christian. I became a Christian when I was a teenager, and so committed my life to Jesus when I was young. And I'd see some of my peers doing drugs and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, they're just having fun. But as I get older and I got to know them better and I see what their life was like outside of school, I realized there were some serious things going on at home that wasn't being addressed. Their basic needs that wasn't being met, whether personally or even physically. And so they did these things as a form of medication. And I see it all the time now as a youth pastor. The kids who there's some need not being met, and so they're trying to make themselves feel better.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that once again. Are there any more questions out there? You can write the questions privately as well. You can send them to me, and I can just read them without names if you feel comfortable and you would like to ask Pastor Matthew until he's with us for a few more minutes. I see a raised hand. Go ahead, Pastor Elizabeth.
For anybody looking for counseling helps, we do have something called the Counseling Initiative, where we will subsidize professional counseling and therapy for families, for moms, for dads. And it's not just for individuals in our churches, it's also for individuals in our community. And so, the last couple of years have been really rough on a lot of families. And so if you're looking for some professional support, we do have a working listing of some Adventist therapists as well as some Christian therapists. And we don't want money or finances to be an issue for people to not get support. So if you're looking for that, we have that listing, and we're here to support you financially to help you get that. So if you're looking for that listing, just send me an email and I can send it out to you.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's really a great help. I've heard about that initiative as well. So if any of you are interested, just contact probably your local pastor would be the best, or directly in the conference, and you would know more information about that. But it can definitely can be helpful. I was watching one of the sessions that you have been there. It was on YouTube, I think 2 weeks ago or so. I don't remember the presenter, but he said a question there. He said many people are afraid of going for counseling because they say that's expensive. But then he said a question, what else is expensive? A divorce, for example. And that costs you much more than going for counseling. And when the conference is there to help, it's really important because a divorce can ruin not only you and your better half, but also your children. Yeah, so that's a great initiative from the conference. Thank you for sharing. Kathy, Jim and Kathy, there is a hand.
Hi, I just wanted to comment. I work with a lot of youth as well, and what I find is sometimes it's helpful to differentiate between like religion and Christianity with them. So sometimes, you know, they may struggle with some of the things that they see in church. They may struggle with some of the beliefs or some of the hypocrisy, but I find that really listening to them and like I think that most of the youth that I've talked to, it's when they wander away from church, it's not that they stop believing in God. They still have that, you know, foundation and that belief in God, but I think sometimes they lose faith in religion, if you know what I mean. And I think if we can kind of weather them through adolescence until they become young adults, and try to encourage them, like not force so much the church thing, but, you know, encourage them in their personal walk, encourage them to keep, you know, to keep up their faith, listen to them, talk with them about, you know, the Bible or some of the challenges that they see. I think that that keeps the door open. I don't know. That's been my experience anyway. As a young person, I wasn't raised in this church, but as a young person, I was pretty devout and then kind of wandered away, but came back as an adult, right? So I think it's just to encourage people to not lose hope if your kids are challenging about attending church or being involved in church activities per se.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. That's true for a lot of people, that they can have faith outside of the church. I don't know your age speaking right now, but the studies have shown a change that typically there were people who were in their teens, they would leave the church, and then when they'd have their kids, they'd come back into the church. But that's no longer the case anymore. They're starting to reinvest into other places. So I would say be very concerned if your kids stop engaging from church activities, because the studies don't bear out now that when you have kids, you come back, they reinvest. I have friends and siblings now who have left the church, and not saying God can't bring them back, but the studies are showing that they're not coming back. And that's why Canada is only growing in Adventism by immigration and not by natural birth anymore. And the same is going to happen within the United States shortly if we follow these secular trends. So it's, you know, I hear what you're saying, and it's true. God can do anything with anyone and save them. But the trends now are not very looking good for Christianity.
Yeah, thank you. There is one more question that I would like to read. How do we, as youth leaders, support those who may be facing challenges within their home? For example, divorce, abuse, addictions, etc.
You're saying it's the youth leader who's challenged by these things?
No, I think, so I will read it again. How do we, as youth leaders, support those who may be facing challenges within their home? So we youth leaders see that some of the families in our church that we are in charge of are having difficulties.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And one of the things that I like, and Liz is probably a better resource for this than I am, but a lot of the time youth ministry and family ministry go hand in hand. So that as a youth leader, sometimes it's okay to say, look, I know I'm a youth leader, but I see that your dad is struggling, so I'm going to help. I'm going to focus my energy on your family right now and less on the kids. Like that's happened a few times over the course of my time, where being a good youth leader means ministering to the parents first before the kids, and especially in times like divorce, which is very typical. It's like taking the soul of a child and sucking it right out of them when parents get divorced. That's the best way of describing it. When kids' parents get divorced, it's like everything good in their life gets sucked away, and it's like they become lifeless shells. That's the That's how I describe it. And so if you're in a circumstance to minister to the parents, that is good, as well as being a resource for the kid and just saying, hey, look, I've gone through hard times with my life as well, like my family, I've gone through a divorce. Being able to empathize with them is very important, that you don't have to pretend to be perfect. Even if it's not the same issue, you can say, look, I've struggled with this or that, to be a real person and not be like the holier than thou figure. But that's the two things I'd say. It's okay to minister to the parents and call them and say, hey, look, I'm your son's youth leader, but he's been telling me this, and I just wanted to let you know I'm praying for you, and I'd like to talk with you if you can, just to be a shoulder for you to talk to. I think that's perfectly appropriate, and that's holistic family ministry.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe sometimes we have to realize as youth leaders or as pastors even that we are not able to help every situation. Certain cases need professional help, and then we would have to find a perfect way to direct them to those people, to those professionals, without offending them, but helping them understand that they would need the help of the professional in order to get their life back on track. Yeah. Well, I would like to thank you for all the good things you have shared with us today, Pastor Matthew. We greatly appreciate. And I would like to thank all the questions that came in directly or indirectly. It has been a great day and amazing presentation today morning. I myself would like to get the PowerPoint as well. So if you can forward that to Pastor Scott later on today or tomorrow or whenever you will have time, I would appreciate that. And we will pray for you so that your ministry would continue to flourish and you will be able to help many other young people to lead to Christ. There is one more last question that came in, if you don't mind. I would like to read that for you before we leave. How do we reach youth whose parents are in and out of the church? So the young person is also in and out of the church because the parents are inconsistent in their involvement.
Very good question. The best way is by getting them into an Adventist school. to be perfectly honest,
Consistent.
get them into an Adventist school, pay for them to get into an Adventist school. The life of a child and youth is so much more important at their school than once a week at their church. So if you can't get them into the local Christian school, then it's that weekly trying to get them connected to a friend to come to the church every week. There are cases where kids will become disciples of Jesus even though their parents are not, but they're rare and far between. So it is a disadvantage for them if their parents are not in the church, and if they don't have family who's in the church, then they need a role model within the church who's older than them that they can look up to and say, oh, this is what a good Christian looks like. This is the kind of person I want to be. So if you can't get them into a Christian school and you don't have an adult figure who cares about them and they look up to, then it's really difficult pragmatically. There are still miracles, but it's a long shot.
Thank you. There is a raised hand also. I'm not sure if there's a question there.
Yeah. I just have a comment on that, actually. I currently have two of my close friends that I've grown up since I was around 9 years old when I came to Canada. And they're not in the church right now. But I think something that has helped me continue the friendship is not so much answering how I can get them to church, but rather how can I just be a good friend to them. And I think that has helped us just form that relationship. And every time I ask them, whenever I do ask them to come out to a social game by the church or just a church service in general, they're more than willing to come because they've built that friendship with me. So sometimes it's good to just look at it at different perspectives. And this is just my personal scenario. So I know every scenario is unique, but I would just encourage for you to get to know the individual, both the teen and the parents, and just build a relationship with them, because that'll last. And the testimony that you give is far more important than just trying to answer the question, how can I get them to come to church?
Yeah, good point there. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you once again. Okay, Pastor Matthew is back. You can hear us? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We would like to ask you if you could pray before I will hand over to the rest of the team today, and before we depart. We'd appreciate your prayer for us, for young people, for everybody present here. And if you could go ahead, please.
Okay, for sure. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, thank you for our teens. Thank you for our youth who are making decisions daily of the kind of people they want to be. And I just pray for every leader and every youth in Ontario and throughout Canada and throughout the United States, that they would find their love and their identity in Jesus. Lord, that you give us wisdom in how we interact with every young person, that we'd always show love and kindness and interest, so that when they interact with us, they can sense your Holy Spirit, and they know that you're real. Like Alessandro said, that you're a friend and that you're someone they need to be around. And so, Lord, bless us in a very special way, and thank you for our short time together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pastor Matt. It's really good to see you. I know that I've known Pastor Matt since I was at Berman, and so it's good to see your face. We just have a couple of announcements. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to stop the recording. So it's just going to say recording has stopped.